And I saw that with my own eyes. Had a powerful impact on me. We don't want that to happen in the United States of America. All right. We are trending in that direction.
Exploring life's journey, one story at a time. This is TrailHeads with Jim Barrett.
Today I'm joined by one of the most recognized and trusted voices in Memphis journalism. For decades, Joe Birch has been a fixture in Mid-South households, presenting the news with professionalism, integrity, and with a sense of genuine connection to the community. But beyond the anchor desk, Joe's story is one of commitment, community service, and a deep love for Memphis and the people who call it home. From covering history-making events across the nation and the world to sharing personal, authentic human stories, he's had a front-row seat to the moments that have shaped his adopted hometown. Today, we'll go beyond the headlines and get to know the man behind the microphone, the camera, and the smartphone. And I'm delighted to welcome veteran news anchor Joe Birch to TrailHeads. Joe, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, Jim Barrett, it's so great to see you. Thank you very much for this most welcome invitation.
Absolutely. Well, and thinking back, I did a little research because I didn't know some of the exact dates, but we were there, both of us, at the beginning of our careers, mine behind the scenes in production, and you got to Memphis in about 78. Is that right?
Well, that's when I started with WMC. I came to Memphis in 1974, and it was really as a result of the Vietnam War. I had a draft card, and I was a solid C+ student in high school. I was not an academic superstar, I'm embarrassed to say. But what happened to me was I grew up in Teaneck, New Jersey, which is right across the Hudson River from Manhattan. My father worked on the ground floor of computer applications in corporate America. He worked at 99 Park Avenue in New York City, right next, literally the closest building to Grand Central Station. And my mother was a stay-at-home mom, and I was the oldest of the 5 Birch kids. Joseph, Patrick, Marianne, Kathleen, and James, the Irish Catholic family there. And so what happened was I went to the Christian Brothers High School of Northern New Jersey, a place called Paramus Catholic Boys High School, where there were girls too on the girls' side, and a door was this thick, okay, between us. And we had lunch together, and we could take biology together in our senior year. And we all fell in love, on that campus. But what happened to me was I was not particularly excited about going to college. I told my dad, maybe I'll join the Navy, maybe I'll, do something. And he took me for a walk around the block, and he says, you can do whatever you want after you graduate from college, but you're going to college. And the Christian Brothers and my mother conspired to send me to Memphis to CBC, Christian Brothers College, now university, in August of 1974. And so that's how I got here. And so one thing led to another. I winked at a girl who graduated magna cum laude. All right. She only got 1 B in her life, and that was in gym, and she's still resentful about it. And long story short, we got married. We've been together a long, long time. And we have 2 sons who both went to the same school. The whole family graduated with honors except the Dunns. We have 2 sons and 5 grandkids. I'm the oldest of 5. I have been working at Channel 5 for almost 50 years. I have 5 grandkids. And unexpectedly, last month, I was sent into the 5th Congressional District here in Tennessee. The legislature rewrote the district lines for Congress, and so I'm in District 5 unexpectedly.
Wow.
5 is a big number for me.
Yes, absolutely. A friendly 5 for Joe. There we go. One other thing I noticed too that I've experienced in more recent years is that one minute you've got a kid who you're carrying on your shoulders, and then the next minute you look up and they're taller than you. That you and I are both, I think, 6 feet plus, and your 2 sons, I think, are a bit taller than that, right?
Yeah, they're ginormous. My oldest boy is the same size as LeBron James. LeBron is 6'7" and change. Then my number 2 son, Matthew, caught on to the basketball thing a little later. He's 6'5", and he loves studying military history, and I call him the military basketball player because he comes down the key and he better get out of his way. He's like a tank. So yeah, we're both over 6 feet, and the kids are huge.
This podcast, TrailHeads, At its core brand is about the connection between getting outdoors and good mental health. And for me, that's always been about hiking. I've had a touch of anxiety and depression for most of my adult life. And for me, antidepressants didn't work. But getting out there on the trails and connecting with something larger than me has always kind of done the trick. And I know that you've been very connected with running. How did that get started?
Well, I've got a trophy. I've got a show and tell.
All
Okay,
right.
right here. This is Mercury, right? And this is a 1914 trophy of a race that my grandfather, born 1889, died 1966. It's got his name on it. City Hall, the Coney Island in New York City. So what happened was my grandfather was a power walker, one of those guys that
Sure.
does the gyration, and he looks so weird. Well, he came in. This is the third place trophy from 1914. So it was a big race. It was a big deal. And my dad ran track in high school and was a star half miler at Teaneck High School in Teaneck, New Jersey. And what happened to him was we found his records after he passed away in the garage. He had been tracking, there was no obviously internet back then. He had been tracking his competitors in Bergen County, New Jersey, which is the county that's attached to the George Washington Bridge, the closest one in New York City and New Jersey, and big county. And he was tracking all the other half milers in the county. And we found his pencil records. He penciled in everybody's time, so he knew exactly what he had to do to win. And he did. And there was a picture in one of our portraits of him breaking the tape. And so those little things have a major impact on a kid. When you see your dad breaking the tape, when you see your grandfather winning the race, you want to do something. And unfortunately, the speed gene skipped a generation. I didn't get it. I never beat my father. When I was about 14 or 15 until we were much older, I challenged him to a race every summer on the beach. I said, "Don't let me win." And we picked the finish line. He smoked me from as a teenager, just smoked me. He was sneaky fast, like you would not like say, but when he did pass away, and that's another story. He suffered from Alzheimer's disease and had the double a punch of being a caregiver for his mother and then having a 14-year journey with it. And he ended up dying in Memphis on January 7th, 2002. And I ended up overseeing his care. But uh, the long story and short of that is that he was a phenomenal dad and he was super fast. And so when it came time to organize races here, and I was running a little bit, but when I quit smoking in the 80s, I'm embarrassed to say I ever did that, but I did. I quit smoking and I started working out and I started running and I kind of loved the connection to my family and running. And then I just had so many great experiences with friends out there. And so I got involved with organizing races and I got all these medals that you see right here
Yeah.
are from the St. Jude Memphis Marathon. And I've done the full 5 times and I've done the half all the other years. And so this year's the 25th anniversary, December 2026. We're going to have our 25th race. And so I'm looking forward to that.
Wow. How did that feel to you? And it's obviously been a tradition in your family. How has that continued to feel for you? I mean, let me go back to the one thing you said. I know you're a little embarrassed about it, but quitting smoking. I mean, my dad was a smoker too, and he was a doctor. And so, what made you decide to stop? And how did you get through that? Because that's a tough one for a lot of people.
Yeah. So part of it was an invitation to a race. Okay. And so I said, yeah, I can beat that guy, in my mind. All right. That's what I would say. I didn't say that out loud to the guy, but the guy invited us to a race in Overton Park. And we lived directly across from the old forest in Overton Park. And for those who don't know who are watching this is a 310-acre park, and it includes the largest urban forest in America. So I go over there to walk mostly and meditate. But here's how I got into it. So I was smoking, and then I tried running, and I said, "Oh my goodness, this isn't working out." And I quit cold turkey on New Year's Eve, 1989, and so I just quit. And then we had a population explosion at WMC Action News 5, Channel 5, where I've worked all these years. And all the guys in the newsroom were bringing cigars because there became new dads, right? So so I started smoking cigars, and I have an addictive personality, Jim. I started liking cigars, and I started smoking cigars. So I started reasoning with myself. I said, Joe, there's enough nicotine in this thing to kill a horse. You might as well just smoke again. So I quit for cigarettes for 6 months, New Year's Eve to June 1990. And in June 1990, I got a carton of cigarettes and I started smoking again. And one morning, I woke up and it felt like I had an anvil on my chest. That's how I describe it. It was really uncomfortable. And I said, that's it. I haven't had a cigar, a cigarette, a Tiparillo, anything ever to smoke since then. I won't smoke a cigar, even though some of my friends enjoy those. And I really do enjoy them when I smoke them, but that's in my history. And so that allowed me to have the lung capacity to start getting in shape. And so I'm not in terrific shape today, but I'm way better than I used to be.
You've been doing that now for St. Jude anyway, for what is 25 years about?
Yeah, well, it will be the 25th coming up in December. Yeah. So 24.
Well, talk a little bit about, I want to dovetail into your work with the Rotary Club, and tell me a little bit about that. And for those who may not know, what does the Rotary Club do?
So Rotary is a service organization. It's a worldwide service organization started in the early 1900s. And it started in Chicago. So that's Rotary Group number 1. And it got to Memphis in 1914, and we became Rotary Group number 96. So we are Club 96. There are literally tens of thousands of Rotary clubs all over the world now. And so what we do is we do service for our community. And this is really where my heart is wired. It's the community. I want to tell you that, I had a lot of opportunities to leave Memphis. And I had a physician pull me aside one day at a race. And he said, you know what? I know you're going to get another job and you're going to leave. But if you stay, you could be a player in this community and help this community tremendously. And that resonated so much with me. And that in that same time, I attended a celebration of one of my mentors and dear friend, Ed Graney, who was the assistant general manager of our TV station, who worked there for more than 50 years and who allowed me to step through the threshold and stay. First as an intern, starting in January of 1978. 1978. And then as just a behind the scenes guy, utility man, lighting man, audio recordist. And then I moved up to reporter. Long story short, I was at these Emmy Awards where Ed was getting the Silver Circle Award for Lifetime Achievement and Contributions. And I saw a whole lot of other folks like him who had been legends in their communities in the Southeastern region. And they talked about the community. And that really struck a chord with me about how we can be of service to the community as broadcasters. And so there was something about all that said, oh, okay, that's what I do. I'm a community guy. This is about the community. And so, a lot of the races that are organized have been for nonprofits. I've been involved with a lot of nonprofits and have an intimate and a deep appreciation for many of the 13,000 nonprofits that are in Memphis. That's how many are here.
Wow.
13,000. We're an impoverished city. We have so many needs. We can talk about that a little later. So you were talking about the Rotary Club. And so at Rotary, they invited me to join. And I did. And, there was a lot of important people there. And I thought, well, I'll make a lot of good connections here and I'll get some scoops. I mean, I do have my own enlightened self-interest in mind. I make a living as a journalist, and you need relationships. And the way you get scoops is through relationships. You just don't give a reporter a story walking down the street like you go to the dry cleaners and give them your shirts. You got to know people and cultivate a relationship and a sense of trust, a spirit of integrity and truthfulness, so that people feel comfortable telling you things. So that's what happened to me. And so Rotary is terrific, and I didn't have a line item for Rotary in my personal budget while my kids were in college and graduate school because, I had two kids in college and all the money was going there. And so even though one of them, well, they both received scholarships, but they were 50%. So I still had to coin up, Jim. And so I stepped away and took a leave of absence. And after I paid off all the graduate school, I get an email one day, and I had promised my wife that I'd take her to London and Paris. And we did that in 2014 when everything was paid off. Okay. And so I'm in Stratford upon Avon in Shakespeare's Town, and there's a Holiday Inn there. And I say, we're staying at the Holiday Inn. That's a Memphis thing that was founded by Kemmons Wilson here in Memphis. And we go in, and what's happening is a Rotary World Conference. And I had just gotten an email from the Memphis Club, please come back. And Robin and I were walking around this conference, and there were incredible presentations about how Rotary digs wells in Africa, feeds kids in India, educates kids in third world countries. And I asked her permission, could I please join Rotary once again? And she said, quote, I like the way they treat their spouses. Yes. And men and women belong to Rotary, okay? And so, but she saw what was happening there. And I rejoined, and that was 2014 to present. And so I've been president of the Memphis Club. That was 2023. It was 2022 to 2023, as we were coming out of COVID. Okay. And that was a challenging thing. And so we met every Wednesday at a restaurant to plan what we were going to do for the club. All right. So we would plan a weekly speakers, that sort of thing, and service projects. What are we going to do? How are we going to serve our people? We began a mobile food pantry, and it grew to 500 families receive a week's worth of groceries from the organizations that we have coalesced, the Mid-South Food Bank, St. Patrick Community Outreach, Memphis Rotary, and many others, including the University of Tennessee Health Science Center. And it's just been an incredible thing. And so we have provided a week's worth of groceries for 500 families since June. It was this month, June 2020. Once a month. And so this is the kind of thing Rotary does. But if you Google or look around the world at Rotary service projects, we're into everything. We're into the peace movement. We're into water in a big way in the third world, digging wells. I mean, Guatemala, Ecuador, Africa, everywhere you can look where there's a need. Rotary is trying to be of service and to be present. And in this impoverished community, just helping our community, because a third of our citizens are what the government describes as, quote, poor. And so the folks need the food. And with the affordability crisis, we have grandmothers waiting all night in their car, lined up, literally at 9:00 the night before we open at 8:30 a.m. on a Saturday. They're in the line. And I've met some incredible people doing this service. And it's all about the community. And that's what I'll come back to every time.
I love that, Joe. And I know that you're a man of faith. I've been a man of faith too. And one of the things when I've struggled with that faith from time to time has been some in the faith community can be a little hypocritical about things. But what I've loved about the church that I finally found in California, Real Life Church, is that they walk the talk, is that they get out there and they serve and they become the hands and feet. And it sounds like that's exactly what Rotary is doing as well.
Well, that's right. And you know what? You love what we do because we have a party. Okay. So you think, okay, these people are standing around in a parking lot giving away government cheese. It's not that at all. Okay. It's working with the food bank and they deliver the food. And then we have Stan Bell, who is a DJ on WDIA, who has a PhD, by the way, in education, who taught and had a whole different career in the Memphis school system and is now retired from that and is on the first radio station in America that was programmed by African American people for African American people. That was WDIA, the Goodwill station, in the 1940s and 50s. It came to life. And so Stan is our DJ, and he plays the hits, and he has his whole sound system down there. And then we have a coffee truck, and we have a mom and pop guy who who runs it. And we have a party. And so during COVID, this was the only place you could go dance. You dance separated in the parking lot. And every month it's a lot of fun. And so there's a great spirit there. And there are congregations from all over the city who have found this very attractive. You know, it's attraction really, not promotion. Attraction. When people find, hey, you know, this is in my wheelhouse, and I think what you guys are doing is part of my calling. I want to help you. We have more than 100 volunteers. It's a party and it's a celebration. And what I do is as I welcome everybody is I say, well, let's make believe we're opening our grocery store and we all own it. And today is our first day of business. And how would you feel if you were the owner of the grocery? You'd welcome them with a big smile. Come on in, you know. And so we treat them as guests. And people love to come. And Stan is playing the music, and my coffee guy is serving up the beverages. In the hot Memphis, we have cold stuff to drink too, and so it's a great celebration once a month.
I think that's the part of it that some people who always talk about, I'd like to do that some point. But I don't have what you have to do that. But I think people don't realize that it's actually fun. It feels good to help others in that. It sounds like that's what you're saying.
That's right. You know, I was up in Ohio yesterday, and I saw a sign that was a quote from Walt Disney, and it's been resonating in my mind today. If you can dream it, you can do it. If you can dream it, you can do it. And I know you know that's true because you're an imaginative man and you took your gifts that you and your passion and you morphed them into a career that was super successful with NBC and then on into your own wonderful journey and helped a lot of folks along the way as you mentored them and taught them the art of creating great promotions and all kinds of other things. Well, you dreamed it and then you did it, right? And I know first the seed of the idea has to be there, and a whole lot of people have a mental block of, oh, I couldn't do that, right? They kind of give up before they ever give themselves a chance to get started. And you have to have a little faith, right? That, hey, if I'm in doing this, and what gives you a little more confidence in your faith is when you have your Rotarians step forward and you have, you know, your faith community step forward. And in our case, it's one church that hosts this and pays for the food, okay, through the food bank, which is deeply discounted. But then it's many congregations. So we're very ecumenical. It's about the community. Hunger doesn't know a denomination. So, you know, hungry says, come on, let's go eat, right? And so it doesn't matter what you are. So we you know, but if you can dream it, you can do it. And I guess if I wanted to tell your trailhead audience, I know Walt Disney's right. And look what happened to his company. Look what happened to him. I mean, I think if you were in business and were circa, you know, 1920s with Walt Disney, he'd have hired you Jim Barrett. I think he just, yeah, this is an imaginative guy. I'm going to put him on my team. I think he would have seen your sparkle.
Thank you so much, Joe. That really means a lot. So, Joe, what was it that had you transition from behind the scenes to moving in front of the camera and reporting and anchoring?
Well, if you ask Ron Burgundy to talk about his career, he will very much enjoy that conversation. you know, when high school kids can't remember my name, right? When I step onto the campus as I'm about to go and speak to a class or an assembly, oh, here comes the Ron Burgundy dude. So I'm the Ron Burgundy of Memphis. I've been around a long, long time. I'm part of the furniture around here. And so, but I didn't get there overnight, right? So what happened to me was I started as an intern. I had watched the local news, mostly on WABC in New York, growing up in the New York TV market, with great interest. I read the newspaper every day. And then I flipped the channels on my black and white TV down in the basement after high school, and I watched everybody. Okay. And I got to know all the news personalities in New York. And I got to pick who I liked. And there were things I saw Geraldo Rivera's career begin. And you can think whatever you want about the guy with the handlebar mustache who's gone a little over the deep end, if you ask me. I mean, he's had a heck of a career, right? But when he started, he was a lawyer who morphed into a television news career in New York at WABC and did some stories that were so compelling. I couldn't miss them. Okay. He had investigative reports that were blowing my mind. And I also turned to WCBS and saw on that station my future boss, the news director who mentored me, a guy named Frank Gardner. And then over here on WNBC, I watched the anchors there and the reporters, and it was just fascinating to me. So I was already interested. I didn't realize I was warming up for a career when I was doing this. I really didn't have it in the back of my mind that I would do this. But you know what? Somebody put me on TV, and I've been so grateful. I came back every day for almost 50 years. So I started out as the lowest form of life in the building as a peon and moved to running teleprompter. This is what the peons do, where we literally had to put pages onto a conveyor belt and there was a little camera and then the image of the script appeared for the anchor so they could see it. And I did this as on like the first day they threw me in there. That's what they did with the enter. Go ahead and do it. You can read. You can make this work. And of course, I screwed it up one way or another, but I finally got it. And I became the guy who did that. Right. And then, it just kind of grew from there into other service positions around the newsroom. But back in the day, before these things, right, everything got miniaturized and cameras were small. We had huge Ikegami cameras. Actually, we were still shooting film. And, I have to explain to high school kids what film is. And that whole process, of hanging it, drying it, putting it on a reel to reel, taking an X-Acto knife, splicing your film clip, A-roll, B-roll, all that. Well, I also have been around for every iteration of videotape. So I was the audio guy who assisted the cameraman who had a big battery on one side and a big giant Ikegami or RCA camera on his shoulder. And there were women photographers at our station too. Gifted people. I mean, terrific people who mentored me behind the scenes. And I learned to run audio. And so I would run around and we'd be out all night, shooting stories and covering the news. And I became super passionate about it. And in 1978, the fire department went on strike in July 1978. And there were 200 plus fires on the night they went out. Okay. And no one died from all of that, but it was incredible. Then the police department went on strike. So I'm rookie. All right. I've been at the station now 7 months. The police went out on strike. The police went on strike. The fire department on strike. There's more news to cover than we had people to cover it. I got addicted to the news business. This went on all summer, 1978, until the whole thing got settled. Then the teachers went on strike. And so I just got addicted to the news business. I got to know some people here, and still I'm a behind the scenes guy. And I started asking questions with the microphone that I'd carry, Sennheiser mic, and my recording and my photographers. And they called me the grip, because that's what you call a guy who schleps the equipment, and especially the audio recordist. So I was the grip porter, right? A play on words, the grip porter. So I would ask questions and I would write stories. And then, you're working weekends, and ultimately the day came when there's no one to cover it. Put him on. And so they put me on in January 1979. So I'd been there 1 year. And then I became sort of a guy they'd allow to be on the air just if they absolutely needed somebody to do it. And then, you see, I told the guy, Frank Gardner, who I mentioned earlier, who's a fascinating character, who had a brilliant career of his own and went to the mountaintop in corporate America as a leader in journalism. But I told him on the first day of my internship, day one, I'm the greenest puppy in the building. And I said, I'm going to be a reporter for you. And he was being polite. He had his head down, but his body language was him. He was shaking his head like this. No, you're not. You're the 10,000th college kid who's come here and said that to me. What makes you different? What he did not realize was who he was dealing with. I do not quit. Okay. I keep showing up every day. And that's what I did. And I wasn't making any money as an intern, but I was still showing. And then when they started paying me money, it was $2.35 an hour. It was the minimum wage in 1978. So it was still making nothing. I think my first check for 2 weeks was $70. But anyway, I starved and I worked like crazy. And I was super passionate. And so in 1980, after I had broken a bunch of stories that no one on the reporting staff had, he said, come in, see me in my office. He sits me down. He says, okay, you are a reporter. He was a tough, grizzled dude. He was a guy who, like, when there was no audio one night on an election night of our reporter who was literally across the street at an election headquarters, and he's doing this, talking, and no sound is coming out. He jumped up on his desk and jumped off his desk into what we call ENG, electronic news gathering, and said, if this building fell down to this direction, it would hit Myron in the head. Give me some audio. And there were some expletives in there. Okay. But Frank said, in that day in 1980, you are a reporter, $15,000 a year, wear a tie jacket every day. I said, thank you, Frank. And man, when that happened, okay, we used to use a lot of two-way radios. So we had walkie-talkies and we had these car, this is before cell phones, right? He would say, where is Joe? When a big story broke. And I knew I was good. I knew, because I was delivering. I was working all the time and I was loving it, right? I was writing stories. I was learning how to do it. And we had to do 2 stories a day, which is very demanding for anybody, right? Think about it. You got to write 2 pieces that are going to be on television where you're telling people what's going on. And I actually got to enjoy that. I actually got off on it. Like the pressure of it, like, okay, I can do this. Yep. And so for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to do this. Okay. And by this time, I have to have this story written. And that's how we did it. You've got to budget everything and think strategically about how we're going to make it to the deadline. And it was, if you saw the movie Broadcast News way back then, Albert Brooks, who's one of my favorite filmmakers of all time, favorite personalities ever, right? He has this Niagra of sweat coming down. When he's the Anchorman, I am Albert Brooks in real life. I am not really Mr. Cool Ron Burgundy. Oh my God, they put me on. I was freaking out. My leg was shaking up and down like this. But I eventually morphed into this sort of riding a bike kind of thing where I got it. This is how you do this. And I got some scoops, and I was very lucky. And I got some big job offers, big time job offers. But for whatever reason, I stayed here. And there's a lot more backstory that Ron Burgundy can tell you another time about that.
Okay. I want to add one little thing that I, as a behind the scenes guy, because I had the fortune of working with you. I've sort of mentioned that earlier, but I worked at TV5 from 1985 to 1987, and then I moved to work at KDK in Pittsburgh. But during my time there, I got to work with you several times, which was a pleasure. At one point, when you were talking about the prompter, that was my first job in production, where I was running studio camera and tearing off scripts, putting them under the same prompter you talked about with the old TV
Right.
camera above it and
Right.
feeding it. And I think I always appreciated you seem to have the most patience for those of us when a story would get killed at the last moment and you're scrambling to take this story out and put this one in. But you were always the most patient about it, because I can understand being on the spot and you're having to read. You had the backup scripts too in front of you, but to see the wrong story up there when you're looking into the lens of the camera had to be disorienting. But there's one other thing that I thought was fascinating. Now everybody knows how to type. I had to take typing at Germantown in high school, but you were a brilliant one-finger typist on those old manual typewriters. And I think I got video of that back in the day. What's the story on that? Did you graduate from one-finger typing?
No, I still do it that way. And I pack them out, but I'm pretty fast with my system. You kind of have to come witness it again. But yeah, that's such an odd thing. I was telling you a minute ago, if you can imagine it, you can do it. Walt Disney quote. Well, I guess I had typing block. Okay. And in high school, I just didn't succeed there in that particular class. And so, but when it's a matter of whether or not you're getting a paycheck or not, that's a different matter. Your life, your life's work depends on this. And so I've got my own little system. It's not exactly one finger, but it works for me.
Yeah. What would you say were your biggest challenges as you started out? You went through some of it. What would you say being a non-broadcast journalist to suddenly here you are? I know there was a transition period, but what were the biggest challenges you were having behind the scene? Maybe some of the insecurities that you had to start out.
Well, I was very, very aware of myself. Maybe a little too preoccupied with myself. I wanted to please my bosses, and so we went from Frank Gardner to Jim Zarchin, who was a terrific guy, and he went off to Chicago with Frank, who then went on to New York, Los Angeles, and leadership at Scripps Howard and elsewhere. Um, and I had Mason Granger as a mentor next. And Mason is the seminal figure in my career. And so the number one thing I wanted to do, I wanted Mason to be proud of what I was doing. And he was like a school teacher. Okay. He's a brilliant guy who went to the University of Virginia and then to the Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism in New York. And he won some prizes there, being a superstar student. And then he came to Memphis. All right. And he started his career in 1976 in Memphis. And so he'd been there 2 years and was blossoming as an on-air personality. He was becoming an anchor. And ultimately, he became our boss, our news director. And he was coming in at 9 a.m. and staying till after the 10 o'clock news, 10:30 p.m. weeknights. Well, that's a long haul. All right. But he would correct your copy. He was like a school teacher, and he would circle a problem and write a note to you and put it in your mailbox if there was a problem with your script. And then when you got a gold star, man, it was a joyous occasion. Yes, he would write, this is what we want to do. This is the kind, keep doing this, And he gave you some attaboys too, but he read every single piece of copy that our people produced. Now that is really meticulous care for the product. I don't know that anywhere in the business today there's a news director doing that. I doubt it. For every newscast that we produce, are you kidding me? He would sit there with a stack, I mean, a literal stack on Friday night and read every morning show, every new news, every single one of the broadcasts. We're on the air a lot. We're like Walmart. We're always open. And he read them all. He read everything because it was under him that these words were said.
Yeah.
These stories were covered. And
Right.
he needed to know what it was his people did. And
Right.
he certainly knew exactly what they did. He knew who was strong. He knew what was good, who was good at certain stories. And there is, a poet's touch that special people get. Special people are blessed with the muse, and the gift uh, of a Jim Barrett kind of a storyteller's gifts that really shine. And he really wanted to cultivate those folks. And usually those folks get hired away, because they're so good. And that's just the nature of the world. That's going to happen. The cream rises to the top and then it moves on because that's what's supposed to happen. I've been an anomaly in that. I've striven for excellence. And so striving for excellence it was always the mission. All right. And I had people who cared about the product, really cared, and cared about me and cared about everybody else who worked there. That matters. I was there when it was like a family. It really was. And it was very competitive. I mean, it was a family, but it was also like, who's going to get daddy's favor today? you know, yeah, because, we wanted to please him. We do. I mean, it's just, you want to please somebody you respect mightily, and he gave us a lot of great, great opportunities. So when he finally got tired of doing all that work Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 10:30 p.m., he began looking at who he wanted to do the 10 o'clock news. And I was lucky enough at age 27, 5 years after arrival, to get that gig in 1983. So I've been an anchor since the 10 o'clock news since 1983. And then in 1990, when he stepped away from the anchor desk completely, I became the guy who did the news. We had an hour broadcast, which I truly loved because you could have long, in-depth stories. But we now have a 5, 6, and 10 o'clock broadcast. And actually, we begin at 3:30, 4, and on through the broadcast day. And so the challenge was creating stories worthy of us, truly worthy of our viewers. And in since the internet's arrival and the 24-hour news cycle, and everybody sort of knows what's going on, you know, and but there really was appointment television at one point. Everybody watched the 10 o'clock news. Now, nobody watches the 10 o'clock news now, I'm sad to say, but that's just the way the world is. It's evolved. It's moved on. We have an avalanche of competition that wiped out that. But, in its day, it was the place people went to find out what was going on.
It's interesting. Mason was actually a mentor of mine as well, in the realm of promo. Because again, when I started, I was running camera in the studio. I even worked on the wrestling on Saturdays, which was fun.
Yeah.
But that was a special perk at that TV station versus many
Yeah.
others across the country. Was on Saturdays you got to work on wrestling. But I had been playing around. In 80, probably around the time you're talking about, 83, 84. WMC had purchased a sort of custom package of time-lapse footage that was shot by then a company called Energy Production. And over the years, they have morphed into what is now Getty Images, a photo stock house. But they'd come to town and they'd shot all of the Memphis iconic landmarks. They'd shot time-lapse of barges flying under the bridges and and downtown and Beale Street and the Liberty Bowl and all these iconic, but nobody was using it yet. They were using it on bumpers, which for those who don't know, the bumper is basically what we'll be back after this. And then you go to a city shot and then you go to the commercial and then you come back in. So that's mostly what those were being used for. And I thought it was a gold mine. So I was practicing editing and cutting this thing together to the theme of Miami Vice. And somehow Mason heard about it and came in and says, why don't you put some shots in of Joe and Jack and Brenda and let's see if we can turn this into a promo. And I was like, okay. So he sort of shepherded me into that. If you remember a spot, and it ended up, Ron Clayman named it Memphis Nice. That was really my first shot. And then I became the director of news promotion for Channel 5 for 13 grand a year. But hey, I was happy like you. I was happy to have the job and to be in the realm of learning to edit and doing all these cool things and right there when it happened. So it's interesting. I guess I didn't realize that Mason had so closely mentored you, but he really played a role in both our careers that way.
He was really a genius, really. And he had a long-standing run there, 1976 to at some point in the 90s. His effect remains on my work. I'll always be grateful to him. He was my top teacher there. Not only in journalism, which was a top shelf example, but also in personal conduct. Away from the camera and his life outside. He was a community guy. He was about serving Memphis and the community, the Mid-South region. And that was an important influence for me. And so, he really and truly was a superstar of human being. And I was really lucky to be there. I came at a really blessed time. There were really gifted people in the building, and I'll always be grateful.
Yeah. Well, I was there too when you well, I guess you were promoted to 10 o'clock right before I got there. So that was sort of my job, was to promote, especially when I got the job Mason gave me. Mostly news series, mostly what was coming up for rating sweeps. But then also I did some spots. One was about you and Brenda Wood at 10 o'clock.
News still happens after the 5 o'clock news is over.
We're keeping up with what's going on in Memphis.
The purpose of having the 10 o'clock news is to bring what has happened between 5 and 10 o'clock to the people.
We have a fine, solid staff of people who work after most folks are going home.
News can be as different as night and day.
There was one of my favorite series was called Back from Beyond with Greeley Kyle, about people who had afterlife experiences, but it became more about how it changed their lives versus what happened when they almost died.
Right.
And I did a feature piece on you, a little 30-second spot that was at the time about you had just gone to China. I want to ask, yeah, you had talked
that
about
was 40 years ago. 40 years ago.
40 years ago? Does it still resonate?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. So, and here's here's an amazing result of that, truly, that is a part of my family now. Okay, so here's how that went. So Mason assigned me to go to China. And for your viewers, you need to know that Memphis had the Memphis in May International Festival that started in 1977. And each year we honor a different country. First one was Japan. And so we would honor the culture of that country. And we would have a curriculum in the school system, which was a brilliant thing to have, where our kids learned all about the country that was being honored. And then we would have a delegation of Memphians go to the country the year before the country was to be honored, so that we could bring as many artists and representatives of that nation to Memphis for Memphis in May. So it's a month-long festival, May 1 through the 31st, and it would be all kinds of fun stuff, including our barbecue and a 10K race was a big deal. And then, of course, the music festival, Beale Street Music Festival. I mean, it just grew and grew and grew. It's one of the coolest things about our city. So in 1987, China was the honored country. And I got to go to the People's Republic of China with the delegation from Memphis, about 40 people, in November 1986 for 3 weeks. And we went to Shanghai, we went to Beijing, where we stayed at the Diantai State Guest House, which is where the President of the United States stays. And
Wow.
we were with the mayors of Memphis and Shelby County, and they were the highest ranking visiting government officials. And they didn't know who to give the presidential suite to, which included a gigantic bedroom, the biggest bedroom you've ever seen, a bathroom that had a bidet in it. We didn't know what a bidet was. The guy who got this room was my photographer, a guy named Melvin Owens, who 120 pounds soaking wet, African American soul brother from Memphis, Tennessee. He had a boardroom and a wraparound porch. This is the presidential suite, and they had us pull straws for it. And Melvin got it because they didn't want to insult the mayors because they didn't know which one was more important. So Melvin got it, my photographer. And since he was my photographer, I was walking around in the presidential suite calling Memphis. It was like it was right next door. The connection was unbelievable. So anyway, we went to 8 different cities over 3 weeks in China. And what an incredible experience that was. And so I get to visit a lot of schools as part of the job, part of the community, right? And always ask the kids, who wants to learn a new language today? And I'd go through a little taste of the languages of all the countries that I've been to, right? And we'd have fun with that. And my son, Matthew, got invited in high school he got tricked by a language teacher who said to him, you know, uh, you look like a Spanish student. You have to take a language. And by the way, you look like a Spanish student. You're not, you couldn't cut Mandarin. So I'll see you in Spanish. This was the language teacher. Psychological trick. And he said, oh, I'll try for the Mandarin. Well, he was the only one who said yes. He got passionate. He was fluent in 2 years. Absolutely fluent in 2 years because he had not only this incredibly wonderful teacher, Miss Lily, who was Chinese, but also the internet. So he could watch Chinese Central Television anytime, right? And so that's what he did in high school. That was his thing. Like we'd be going somewhere, he'd have an iPad and he'd be watching Chinese TV. That's the craziest thing in Memphis, Tennessee, right? So this boy ends up going to college at Christian Brothers University, as I mentioned, but we don't have Mandarin as a course option at that school. Rhodes College, which I live 1/10 of a mile east of Rhodes, does have it. We have a cooperating agreement. So he got the opportunity to go take Mandarin at Rhodes. And I said, wait a minute, you can't walk into Mandarin 101 fluent. Right? You have to go 3 weeks before school starts, explain yourself to the professor. So he did that. They were blown away. He tested out, and this is daddy bragging now, of 30 hours of Asian studies because he showed them he knew it. He cooked in 7 different styles for them, speaking Chinese the whole time. There were 3 professors who graded him on all this. He knew poetry. He knew more than anybody I've ever heard of in high school who knew all this stuff. And so he got 30 hours of Asian studies and a minor in Mandarin, and it ended up getting a medal for in his college graduation for his incredible excellence in this world, And so in that particular realm of the world. And so one of the things at Rhodes College that they have is about 90 kids from the People's Republic of China come to Memphis to go to school there. The cream of the crop, brilliant kids. And the professor said, since you know the language, why don't you show the kids around? And he fell in love with one of them on a tour, and she's our daughter-in-law. So we have two beautiful babies who are the fruit of the marriage of a father from Memphis and a beautiful mom from China.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
What a gift. But
Yes.
it really started. I think my son's imagination about Chinese started because I went there 40 years ago and would come to his classroom every year because, when the teacher finds out your dad is the Anchorman, he's the local Ron Burgundy, would you please come speak to our class? So I come and then I do my little riff with languages, and I'm no polyglot, somebody who can speak a lot of languages, but I know a little bit, of a little, and so does he. He knows lots of, so he becomes, not tell you a little bit about this kid. He goes from college to AutoZone Corporate, which is here in Memphis. That's a Memphis Fortune 500 company. And he rose through the ranks there and became a category manager by the time he was 29, which is a big deal in automotive parts, which is what AutoZone sells. More than 6,000 stores across the country, mostly in North America, Mexico. Anyway, he was the guy they would frequently send to China to look under the hood to say, you can make these widgets. You say you can make it. Let's see. And so he had a great career there. Now he's got his own company as a partner. It's a startup with a guy making auto parts in Poland, which is the plan B from China because, the current business climate between the US and China is not optimal. And so this is the plan B where uh, he can make auto parts at a reasonable rate and import them to the United States. And so, very proud of this young man and his brother, who is a partner at a company that monitors your retirement funds. And so he's a talented guy too.
You guys have done well.
Well, you see, I married this magna cum laude woman. I'm a solid C plus student, Jim. She's magna cum laude. I promise you, she's still angry about the B and Jim. And my boys all graduated with honors and got scholarships. So, and went on to their own graduate school. So, they've done well because of my wife. She did a really good job getting them ready.
It sounds, and I won't get too personal here, but it sounds like she was obviously instrumental in your choice after college to stay in Memphis. So in answering this, feel as free as you want to inject that into your answer. But what was it that obviously when you came specifically, I guess, to go to school, but what was it about Memphis that drew you in, that it's now become, I guess, your adopted home after being from the Northeast?
Yeah, 52 years I've been here. So, yeah, what happened was I winked at this woman named Robin, a Memphian, and her family is here, and we got together almost 50 years ago. And so when we did finally get married 43 years ago this month, um, we had instant childcare. I mean, the price of that is not it's not an inexpensive thing these days, but it didn't cost as much then, but I mean, it's still a great thing to have. Free childcare with somebody you trust implicitly, your mother-in-law, her mother, who will be 89 next month and is like going to outlive us all. She's rock solid, tough as nails, and we're going to have a big party for her around the 4th of July at her 89th birthday. And then, there was also, so these job offers would come, all right? And there was a bunch of them, especially when Rupert Murdoch created Fox News. So a whole lot of CBS affiliates got taken over and had to move and sort of restart their newsrooms. And I was getting a job offer or a hard nibble every week for a significant period. And,
Can you tell me
because
where some of those cities were? Which
yeah,
cities?
sure. So there was Cleveland. There was who had some of the same mentors that I had, who we mentioned here. Um, there was Tampa, New Orleans was a big one where I got the big offer from WWL, and a guy named Joe Duke was the news director at the time. And so the casinos came to Tunica, which is part of the Memphis market, in 1992. And Joe Duke was a character, calls me up from one of the casinos and said, I've come up here to watch you for a week, to watch every one of your shows for a week, because I think you're my guy. But I've been playing the slots all the other time. So I've been staying down here in Tunica, and I'm just watching you, and I'm offering you the WWL main gig. It's yours right now. The gentleman who had the job for so many years was retiring. So if I took that, I would have been at Katrina in person. I did end up going there to cover it twice, but I would have been the WLWL guy, and I couldn't convince my better half to go to WWL. So I had to say thank you, but no thank you. And so here's what happens 3 weeks later. Joe Duke becomes the bureau chief in New York for CBS News. All right, he was on the way out. The person who came in is now the senior executive vice president of Gray Media, which owns Channel 5 now. She works in Atlanta, and she became that news director for that newsroom. And I always tell her when I see her, because she visits Memphis from now and then, I said, you would have fired me so fast because you wanted your guy in there. I would have had that job for 3 weeks. You'd have fired me. Come on, admit it. And she, no, I wouldn't have. I said, come on. So I have some fun with her. So, in a way, I've sort of I've preserved my own career by being pretty careful, by not taking that many risks. So some of the other cities, I did get a huge offer from WSB in Atlanta. I mean, I went to dinner with the GM at the steakhouse with his wife and my wife, and I mean, that was going to happen in 1999. And then the guy who was retiring there, the veteran, the Ron Burgundy of that station, unretired and said, no, I'm not retiring. I'm going to keep doing it. And I was like, oh, wait a second. I have kids who need to go to college. I have to have a job. So that was 1999. So that was a big gig. And, other Atlanta stations have called me. All the Memphis stations have tried to hire me. At one point in, different administrations, if you will. And so but I've been fiercely loyal to Channel 5 because this is the hand that fed me. This is the hand that put up with me because I was in the beginning.
That's kind of rare, I think. I could be wrong. I tried to read about some of the other folks who've been at a station for a long time, but I would think that you're one of the few who started as an intern and has become a main anchor. Is that accurate?
That's right. I think it's pretty rare now, and there are probably other people in the history of television news who've done it like that, but I'm not quite sure. George Clooney's father in Cincinnati, Nick Clooney, was the big longtime anchor man there, and so George Clooney grew up in that business, and his aunt was Rosemary Clooney, a famous singer in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, and so he grew up with a lot of knowledge of this business and show business. And that helped launch him into the incredible career he's had. But Nick Clooney was like that, long time, same station, one guy, right? Stay put. And, I thought to myself, you got to show some loyalty. All right. And, so, I just would not leave this station in this market. I just wouldn't do it. There was one time where a local station really came after me hard. Like I said, we really, really want you, and made an attractive offer. But there was also with the other markets. So they see what you can do, in the focus groups, right? And WSB, by the way, does nothing without a focus group. They study their people before and they make sure people like them, the potential hire, way before the offer is made, right? So it was really cool to get an offer from them. Like, it was an affirmation for me. But and Memphis is kind of like a kind of a perfect proving ground for Atlanta, I think. But it didn't happen, and I am grateful now in 2020 hindsight to have the relationships that I have in Memphis. So I can walk into a restaurant and I can see, ooh, the airport director is talking to the guy who runs the Chamber of Commerce. Wonder what that's about. Then I can make a phone call. Well, hey, I saw you. Did you have a good lunch with the airport director today? Can you share anything about that? What's going on? When I see big bankers together, with important people, I can make a call. Say I might have their cell phone number, and I might be able to get a tip, and I might get a scoop because I've been trusted. You know, you mentioned that I had the blessing of interviewing your dad way back when, and
Mid
that was
'80s, most likely. It was my dad was the medical director at Le Bonheur Children's, and he also was an infectious disease specialist. But yeah,
so yeah. So people, I think when you're part of the furniture in the community, there's a certain amount of trust that they have in you, and so that's been a blessing, to have that. And I think some of the scoops, like, for example, uh, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital is based here. And the guy who is retiring suggested me to MC his retirement dinner on June 25th. And that happens to be the 43rd wedding anniversary for my wife and I. And I'm going to be able to get to tell them that the night we got married at the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception on Central Avenue here in Memphis, we had the party, and then we went to the Peabody for our wedding night. And who walked into the Peabody as we came in, her in her bridal gown and me in my tux and tails, but Danny Thomas. And
wow.
he kissed my wife on the cheek and wished us a lot of blessings and good luck. And I think I am the last working journalist in Memphis anyway who knew Danny Thomas. He knew me, and I interviewed him on numerous occasions, and I have a lot of stories about that. And look what he built. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's the number one most trusted brand in America. It's the number one healthcare charity in the world. They raise north of 2.6 billion a year. I mean, a Memphis hospital. He was the one he was the genius who saw the wisdom of taking the gift of celebrity and morphing it into something that would save kids' lives. And they're doing the moonshot there with cancer. They are looking for the cure to cancer. So Dr. James R. Downing is retiring after 12 years as the CEO. So when we found out he was retiring, I had his cell phone number. I called him up. I left a message, Dr. Downing, I would so appreciate an interview today. I got it. We worked it out. We shot the story, wrote it quickly. It aired a few hours after the interview. He liked it. And now I'm emceeing his retirement dinner. And so that kind of a trust, you know, is the fruit of 50 years, almost 50 years of being in the same place, staying pretty close to the home fires. And so, um, one of the other influences I need to let you know about is I went to a lot of the other major markets. Okay, so I was on vacation in LA one time when the movie The Firm came out. So Tom Cruise was there. So I called my boss in Memphis and I said, I'm on vacation in LA. Could you call the news director at KNBC in Burbank and ask permission for me to tag along with their crew? And then I would take their tape. And, we didn't have the technology we have today. So whatever year that was in the 90s, that movie came out. I offered to run the tape back to KNBC as sort of an enticement for them to give me the opportunity. So I met Jacqueline Bisset that night. I mean, it's unbelievable beauty. And Gary Busey was there. So I interviewed him, and Tom Cruise was a star of that movie. I interviewed him with the NBC cameras. And then we raced it back and we got it on. But I saw the dynamics in those newsrooms. I did the same thing in New York with another story. I saw the dynamics going on in that newsroom. I didn't want to be part of that. That did not look attractive to me. That did not look fun. And I had a lot of people who'd been to the mountaintop in corporate network journalism I talked with. I said, "What's it like?" And they said, "Well, there's a lot of pressure, you know." It's basically it's you work hard and you're married to them and you're their baby and they're going to call you at any hour to go anywhere. And I said, "Do I really want to do that?" There's only one Tom Brokaw. He was my icon. I got to know him to a degree. Um, he knew who I was, and I said, "No, I think I'm going to stay here." As Now, you can't imagine Brokaw staying at Omaha. That's where he started, right? You just can't imagine that. I mean, he had this amazing career. He was at WSB and then KNBC and then on to the Today Show and Infamy. And that was just not in the cards for this career. But maybe in my next one.
Well, one thing I was thinking of too, especially when you mentioned Tom Brokaw, I have a memory that Tom Brokaw came to Channel. Maybe it was the 10th anniversary of Elvis's death, which would have been 87. Did he host the nightly news from WMC at some point there? I feel like maybe I could be totally wrong, but I think that happened.
He was an honoree at a luncheon where I got to MC, and what got him laughing was that a lot of people carried around at that time. They had the WWJD bracelet. What would Jesus do? But I said I don't have that bracelet. I have the TBD. What would Tom Brokaw do? Would Tom Brokaw wear a tie with a company logo on it? I don't think so. I'm not going to wear it. Thank you for that gift, but I'm not going to wear it. Would Tom Brokaw, ask this question? I gave a bunch of examples of what Brokaw would not do. And I got him laughing, and his wife was at this event. And he got up there and gave this just one of the best presentations I've ever heard of a speaker. He's a totally gifted guy. And then we did a Q&A together, where we talked about his book, The Greatest Generation, about World War II had just come about and the veterans and what they accomplished, and I had some stories about people in my family who served in that conflict. And it was just a magical thing. But there's only one Tom Brokaw to me, all right? And so I'm not that. I'm not quite that. Okay, I'm just Joe, all right? And so, but I've been blessed, and I get to serve the Memphis viewers. I get to serve the Mid-South viewers, and don't they deserve somebody who's dedicated as Brokaw is to what he did? Well, yes, they do.
Yes.
And so I've devoted my life to that and the community, serving the community. And so it's been a charmed life, our family. And my kids have had stability. They've had family. They've had the blessing of friends, longtime friends, and good careers, right in our city. And it's somewhat of an anomaly for that, too, to have your kids stay in Memphis and then become successful in their careers. And, that's what we all want, is the family nearby.
One story that I was there for that was a huge one was the Challenger. I remember coming into work. I was going to University of Memphis at the time. My girlfriend and I at the time we went to have lunch, and the story was just breaking, and it was on the TV monitors at Pizza Hut, down the street from Memphis State. And then I would come into work, I think at about 4. And of course, by then it was just bustling. This horrible thing that had happened in Cape Canaveral. What do you remember about that and some of the other national stories? Because at the local station, it's always about how does this affect Memphis? How was that for you, connecting with a national or an international story at a local level?
Well, usually, when a national story like that breaks, or a global story, the network takes over, and I'm sure that's what happened on our air. President Reagan was president during that time. And ultimately, he made a powerful speech in memory of our astronauts. But on the moment that happened, on that day, Challenger exploded after liftoff. Incredibly sad story. I was driving to Nashville to interview the governor of Tennessee, Lamar Alexander, and not quite sure if I remember this was his exit interview. I'd have to look at the dates, but I was doing a piece with him. Lamar, who went on to become the education secretary under George H.W. Bush, and then a United States senator, was governor of Tennessee from 1978 to 1986. So I think that's when Challenger happened. And I interviewed the governor, and I had the honor of being in his presence and asking some questions about that. And that's what I remember from that day, because that was my assignment, to go talk to Lamar and do his quote exit interview. I think that's what it was. Back in the days when there was bipartisanship among politicians, there was that collegiality. There was that uh, great spirit of, bipartisanship for the benefit of all people that was in the air here in this state. And it was a great thing. It's something we need to get back to in America, because it's compromise that carries forward progress in our country. But to answer your question about challenge that day, it was that was my big interview with Lamar. Ironically, I'm going to interview him again at the end of the month on the 24th. He's coming to town. He's on a book tour, and he's probably written 30 books. And he's got a new book, The Education of a Senator. And I need to read that before January 24th when I interview him. I need to get on that. Yeah.
As far as technology, there's a high definition TV studio right here, and I've seen you doing that from the field. How much of a role has the shrinking of technology changed your job?
I've had future shock happen to me, literally physically. So I went to Katrina. All right. So that's 2005. All right. And I followed a group of men from Germantown United Methodist Church, the men's club, went down to Ocean Springs to help a retired Air Force colonel put his house back together. And this colonel was selected because everybody needed help getting their house back together. But they selected this colonel because he cared for his brother, who was a special needs person and a senior citizen, and his wife. And so that's how this particular church came to discern who to help. Okay. And when that colonel saw 30 guys, that tough old man, the tears are rolling, and there's signs everywhere. There's destruction everywhere, stay out, no loitering, no looting, I mean, it was crazy, right? It was the Wild West down there. But here's the technology. I went down there, and on the way we stopped in Hattiesburg and dropped off to a sorority house, a whole bunch of toys, teddy bears and dolls and things like that, for this sorority to give to kids who'd been impacted by Katrina. And I emailed my story for the first time in 2005. And when just to give you a little backstory. So I started in film, and then I was at every iteration of videotape, and we used to time flights of airplanes before satellites, to deliver the tape edited best, that would be best case scenario, but often raw material, raw video, put it on the plane to get back to Memphis. And we'd have somebody waiting at the airport to get the delivery, get it back to the station, and edit. And so when I emailed my story and I said, this is really going back to Memphis right now, my legs got weak and I got a little dizzy and I fell into a chair. I couldn't believe it. And we could just email stuff.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? I mean, that's unbelievable. And now, I mean, we can instantly be on camera anywhere because of these, porta packs that we have and the the cellular system that we all now use in local news. And of course, we had satellite trucks before that, and live trucks, that used a microwave beam. But it's all evolved, and it's been an education. Lamar's book is called "The Education of a Senator." My book is "The Education of a Newsman." Of all this technology, it's been, frankly, I guess I'm a dinosaur, Jim. I'm not totally comfortable with it all. As I explained to you, just the miracle of this interview right here, I said, well, I'm not the engineer, right? Because I'm just not wired that way. I'm more of a writer and a storyteller than an engineer techie kind of guy. And so it's been a challenge keeping up with it.
The state of freedom of the press, freedom of speech. How do you feel about that as a career newsman?
When I went to China 40 years ago, I was in Kunming, and we were with the two mayors, the mayor of Memphis, Dick Hackett, and the mayor of Shelby County, Tennessee, the late William N. Morris. So the Joe Birch of Kunming, China, and all the Chinese press came out, and they covered the story of these Memphis people visiting Kunming, and they wrote their story. And here's what I watched. They had to write their story right then, because the senator, the important official from the communist government, who was with the equivalency of a U.S. senator, was in town to greet the Memphis mayors and welcome them at a banquet. And so these great journalists from the People's Republic of China had to write their story on the spot. And the aide to the senator from China went around to each reporter and approved the copy or rejected it and told them to do it over. And I saw that with my own eyes. Had a powerful impact on me. We don't want that to happen in the United States of America. All right. We are trending in that direction. There are forces in place who want an authoritarian kind of government where we would have that, where the freedom of the press and the freedom of speech would be restricted, and you would have to get the copy approved by the government aid in order to present it. That is not anywhere near the zip code of the U.S. Constitution that the founders of this country created in the origins of this great land in Philadelphia. That is completely alien to our way of life. It is my belief we will overcome the threats to the freedom of speech and freedom of the press. It is my belief that the true America will ring. I pray this is true for my children and my grandchildren and for all our country and the world. America, the beacon of democracy, will shine forth. And right now, we're in a very challenging moment for the press and for freedom of speech. But I think ultimately the day will arrive where we will get back on our feet and be just fine.
Thank you for sharing that, Joe. So, Joe, are you ready for your lightning round?
Yes, I am, Jim. Go forward.
Okay. Ribs or pulled pork?
Wow. Ribs or pulled pork? I'm going to go pulled pork. Pulled pork from Payne's on Lamar.
Top 3 favorite Memphis music acts?
Great question. Keith Sykes became a personal friend. Bigtime. He was on Saturday Night Live. He's become a friend, and I just love that guy. He holds a songwriter workshop. He's just wonderful. I also I thought Larry Raspberry was a talented man, and he's still cranking them out. And of course, the great Elvis Presley. You just can't deny it. The man's still has an impact on our city today.
Get a chance, check out my friend Susan Marshall. She also plays. She's got a regular gig down on Beale Street.
Indeed. Susan's terrific.
Yeah. First story you ever covered? I think you told me, but what's the first story?
First really big story that I did was a Sunday night when there was an ice storm and the bridge across the Mississippi River from Memphis was frozen, but we traveled on it anyway, and there were hundreds of travelers who became stranded at the West Memphis Civic Center. And that was the first really big story that I got to cover on the air. And the newsroom applauded after it aired. And I said, I'm home.
What's your most memorable interview?
Wow. Well, there's a zillion of them. I did get a soundbite from Pope St. John Paul II in 1992 in Roma. I was wearing my mic, and he came at his Wednesday audience, and I had my photographer, Charles Stewart, about 40 feet to my right. And I said, Holy Father, the people of Memphis send you their warmest greetings. And he said in his Polish accent, God bless Tennessee. He knew where Memphis was. So that was a great get. And I also have gotten to interview a lot of the icons of the civil rights movement. Andrew Young, I interviewed him when he was the chairman of the Olympics in 1996. I got the scoop that he would be honored by the National Civil Rights Museum, which is in Memphis. And I went to see him, and people from all over the world were in his office, as you might imagine. He's the co-chairman of the Olympics, and I got to interview him there. That was pretty great. I got to I covered the election of the first African-American mayor of the city all night, October 3rd, 1991, when W.W. Harrington, our school superintendent, Dr. Willie Harrington, was elected as the first African-American mayor of our city, the first elected. There had been another African-American mayor who was appointed as a result of being the chairman of the city council, but Dr. Harrington was elected, and that interview that I got to do as a result of that, I interviewed Isaac Hayes and Barry White, who came to town for the inauguration of the new mayor. And, there were just moments when I was interviewing Harrington where it came to me, like sometimes you get these moments where you're a fly on the wall in your own life and you get to see yourself like in a new way. I said, I was born for this, to do this interview, because I had really covered him from the day he became the school superintendent to the moment he became the mayor. And we had a love-hate relationship because, there was some controversy that we put on the air, but it was pretty exciting times.
Yeah. If you could relive one day of your career, what would it be and why?
Wow, if I could relive one day of my career. Well, that's a tough one. In 1996, I got to go cover the Olympic Games in Atlanta. And the station entrusted me with a photographer, and they didn't tell me any story to do. I got scoops all over the place, and the idea was that people who were coming from Memphis to Atlanta knew me and recognized me. The local Ron Burgundy of Memphis is in Atlanta. I'm walking around. Memphis people were all saying hi to me every day, all day. We were greeting people, and that was a great 25 days I was there covering that. It was a great thrill to do that for those 25 days. I guess maybe I would pick one of those 25 days. I also got to run the Olympic torch when it came through Memphis that May. That was a mountaintop moment, man. Let me tell you, my heart was pumping some serious adrenaline, and I had the Olympic flame in my hand, and I was running it down Overton Park Avenue, right around the corner here, and it was just absolutely thrilling. And you got to tilt it and light the torch for the next person who's running it, and that was a mountaintop moment. And the particular day that happened, Memphis in May International Festival, which we've already mentioned, was celebrating its 20th anniversary in 1996. And so the representatives from all the ambassadors from all the countries we'd honored were here, along with Vice President Gore and a whole lot of other important people. And the torch came through town. And the Sunset Symphony was happening, and it was just wow. Can you believe this is happening in our city? It was just a monster day. I think and I got to cover that and be a part of it.
Who in media, living or deceased, do you really admire?
Well, I think Brokaw is my hero. He was there when the Berlin Wall came down. He got a tip on that, and he was present. Can you imagine? And all the other anchormen were back in New York. And he was there in Berlin. And the world changed, The world changed, and Gorbachev was trying to create perestroika, the new openness, and unfortunately, his spirit has not dominated the Russian Federation. I wish it would. But he's my hero, Brokaw. Yeah. I got to see him, do his thing, and he's really good at his prime.
Let me ask you this one. This is the last one. What is a bucket list destination for you and your wife?
Bucket list. Oh, wow. We want to go. We're big fans of Masterpiece Theater on PBS. We watch that. I'm in my 70s now, and so this is sort of something you do in your 70s. But I think the productions there are so good, and it's always sponsored by that cruise line, and so we want to. When we slow down a little bit, we want to travel, and I want to take one of those cruises, especially through Europe, on a riverboat that has a limited number of people on it. Yeah, I'd say that Europe, via the cruise lines.
It's great. I want to circle back to one thing because we actually were talking about it before I was recording. I've always felt closer to you than any other news talent in Memphis, including some of the other folks I worked with. And much of that has to do with you were really kind to my dad, my late dad, Dr. Fred Barrett, who was at Le Bonheur. And he always was a fan of yours. You were his most trusted news gatherer. And but he always said, that Joe Birch, he took me aside when I was just nervous, and you guys know that I always looked angry when I was on camera, but Joe took me aside and just put my mind at ease. What do you remember about that?
Well, yeah, I do an interview every day, or a couple of interviews live on TV, and people are concerned about how they're going to appear. They're nervous if they're not used to it. Young people today, the influencers, are comfortable with being on camera. They turn the thing on and they're better at TV than I am, right? And I've been doing it for 50 years, and they're 16 years old, and you're already better than me. But what I tell people is what a heart hears. So speak from your heart, all right? So don't worry about anything else, but just try to answer the question from your heart, because that's one heart hears another heart. That's the number one thing. The second thing I tell them, it's no big deal to be on TV. There used to be such a thing as appointment TV, but now we flip it on and it's background white noise, and we go about folding the laundry and making dinner and seeing our kids and grandkids and hugging each other. And if something really piques our interest, or we hear a word that catches our attention, we might focus and tune in. But most of all, people are not really paying attention. That's it. I'm sorry to tell you that. I know you're here to promote something and you really want them to listen to your message, but they're really not paying attention. So don't worry about it. Just don't worry about it. Just relax and be yourself and speak from the heart, and everything's going to be fine. And people generally take that advice, and I try to be as compassionate as possible, because we want our shows, our newscasts, to be compelling. And so we want people to feel some sense of relaxation when they're, sharing. So that's what I say. That's what I think I told your dad.
Joe Birch, thank you for just being awesome. Thank you for being a mentor of mine and being nice to my dad, and just being, coming up on 50 years at TV5 in Memphis. Congratulations on that. And I just so appreciate you being the guest on my little podcast here, Trailheads. Thank you.
Well, I apologize, Jim, for having a X-rated statue. I should have turned Mercury. So this, I don't know if this you'll allow families. You might have an X rating on this, but hey, it's Grandpa's statue.
Fix it in post. We'll crop it or something there.
Great being with you. God bless.
You too, Joe. Thank you.